Okay, this is the follow-on to the last video where we were working to finalize the dialog box for the character create dialogue in this scene. I have gone ahead since then and added in a wisdom field here, a label, which I'm going to just adjust downward just a little bit. Okay, that looks about right. And so it has a new spinner. It's added to it. All I had to do was just copy the Charisma spin control and its label, drag the copy down, rename them. Since they're a child of the attribute pool, which is where they were found, then the attribute pool, remember, dynamically looks up all of its spin controls, and it registers them and does everything. So adding another one didn't really take any time. Nor does that change the way the play button works, because the pool distribution will now be over just one more spin control, but it still finishes when all the points have been distributed. So that's all I had to do there. In the script, I made a few changes there. First of all, I've added in the other spin controls here. I've also added in the lookups for the spin controls. I have, on play click, loaded the values out of the remaining spin controls. And the other thing I did was I wanted to hook up the class selection here, and this was a bit awkward to do. I could have registered the click handlers for the buttons and then loaded things, but I wanted to try to take the buttons, for example, the mage button, and use the on-click event here inside the inspector. And to do that, we can then we can add with this button here, add to a list. And here, let me delete this one. I'll re-add. This is the warp mage here. So when we go to add, we have an object here. We can either select it, or easier thing to do is you drag. We want to drag the panel, because the script that controls all the buttons is this character create script. That's part of the panel. So let's go back here. I'll drag the panel and drop it down here into the object. And at this point, I can select one of the functions. And you'll see I'm a list of different things. Character creates a script I want to do, and I have these functions down here. So I'll just select mage. The trick to getting those to show up, and it is a kind of an important trick, was the only functions that can show up down in that on-click handler must all return void. They must either have 0 parameters, or they can have a parameter with an integer, a floating point value, a boolean, a string, or unity gain object. You cannot have any functions that take more than one parameter, but so you can have 0 or 1 of those. And that really got in my way there, because you see the other thing that I've done here, you see this mob class type class mage. Let me show you what I did to mob here. I added one more thing to mob, and I added this class type enumeration. So every mobile object will be one of these types to date, and then there will be a variable in here that will store the mob type. And so that we can then get from the mob namespace one of the classes. So the character create wants to store it inside class created, which is again mob.text. Right? We will keep track of what the last class that was selected, because you click on those buttons, and so we have to assign them. I cannot assign a variable of type, enumerated type, as a parameter to this function. Remember, only integers and floats and booleans and strings and game objects can be done, and those aren't. And enumeration is not one of those. It would have been nice, because then I could have made one function and just passed the appropriate value in from the inspector. But since it didn't, I had to build 3 functions. That's really kind of awkward. But I went with it. So at this point, if we were to run it, I could click on these buttons here, and one of them, they get highlighted in green when they're selected, or when they're see, I can hover over them, but if I actually click on them, oh, actually I'm not highlighting them in green. I used to do that. I didn't put the code in to do that. I should make that text appear permanently and somehow indicate which selection is made on there so that it doesn't go off if the button is clicked. Think about that for a moment. But what happens is that information is stored in the inside the variables in this script here, and then we have enough information we can go and get the player, just as we copied this stuff out here. The player class now. Player class. Do you not have a class? Maybe it was mob type or something like that. Alright, let me go find what the player is. Remember, the player derives from mob. So all the stuff that's in mob here should be a mob class. Is that not? Maybe that needs to actually be specifically made public. Let's do that. That could be its problem. If I go back to player, no, character create, and I was trying to say player dot mob class equals, and this will be the class selected. Okay, so whatever the last button that was pressed on the classes will select here. Let's think about how I'm going to change the button types. Now, did I actually load the buttons? I did not. I did at one point, and I took those out because I didn't think I need them, but I think I do need them now. Let's go back to the inspector, and let's look down in my class icons folder. And if I look down there, you see the buttons are like 100, Mage 100, and then there's Mage 100 HL for highlight. Each one of those three here has a highlighted button. I'm just going to swap out the image for the button once you click on it. Well, it's a good thing I have those three classes down there. That'll make it a little, I mean, those three functions down at the bottom. That'll make it easier once I have the buttons. Let's go get those buttons, though. So I will make a private button, which will be the war button. I had this at one time. Private button, mage button, but I decided I didn't need it. And priest button. Alright, so I will go and look those up down here, and this will be as easy as saying war button equals transform dot find deep child. And that's war space button dot get component button. The mage button equals, in fact, let me just copy this line here. It'd be easier to switch the pieces that change, that is to type all that in each time. Alright, so mage and priest. Alright, there, I just have to say mage and priest right there, and now I have all my buttons. If I want to double check on this, I will say if war button and mage button and priest button, if all three of those exist, debug.log found all buttons. Pretty vague from where that comes from, but I only expect to see that once. Click run, and I see found all buttons down here. I also stop it, switch to the console, and I see found all buttons. Okay, so that tells me that all the buttons are found. If they're all found once, as long as I don't change anything, like rename the buttons, then I don't need to go and double check that again. I'll just trust that they're found. Okay, these will always be found unless I rename them. Since they're find deep child, I can move them around in the hierarchy as much as I want to. That's fine. Now, how am I going to select this? Well, I have a the button image. Let's go check the button here. The button image is a particular image type, isn't it? Select graphic. So I can see mage button. Where is that mage button found? Okay, that's the target graphic, but priest button. Oh, I want the source image. That's what I want. Source image. And this is a sprite, so it needs to be a sprite. I see sprites in here from H100HL and all that. So all I need to do is, I have the button itself, I will need to get the image, source image from the parent container. I ought to be able to do that. Actually, let me go get that from here. I'll just create 3 more images here and do it this way. Private image, war image, war button image, private image, priest, mage button image, and private image, priest button image. So I have those 3 images. I will go and select these 3 things, copy them, and make duplicates here. This will be the war button image. This will be the mage button image, and the priest button image. Those 3 will come out of here. And instead of bringing an image, instead of asking for a button, I'll ask for an image. Okay. While I'm now, since I found the buttons that way, I find the images that way too. And the reason is these are peers. When we look up the mage button with the space here, these are the names of the game objects. We're looking for components in here. These are the components down here. So while I found the button in one case, I found the image in the other. And if I look down here, you'll see that I'm looking for images on the last 3. Okay. I can switch out the images then, but just by giving it the name of another sprite, I think. So mage button image equals, and this is going to be an interesting thing here. It says mage 100. Can I just put in the name down here? Mage 100 gel? I don't know. Okay, let me go work on how do I assign an image out in a script. The reason this isn't going to work is this is a file name and it doesn't have an object that means anything here. And that's our first clue, is that we need to have as a resource. First of all, I want to be reloading the sprite that corresponds to the image. The image is kind of a complex task. But second of all, I want to pull it out of my resources here. So I think that I might be able to do something with let's load up the sprite here. Sprite, and this is the highlighted image. And this one here, I think I can get from resources. And there's load, and load will take a path to a string. And I believe this should be a path under in a resources folder. Now I don't know if I actually created a resources folder. We're going to have to do that. Actually clicked on the wrong button down here. I don't have resources underneath my assets. So we're going to create a resources folder here real fast. And so we'll create a resources folder here under assets. There's be a folder named resources. And the resource loader should find those in there. Let me bring up the script here. And this is where I was going with this before. Resources.load. And it says loads and assets stored at a path in a resources folder. Well, I can just give it the name. Now, the path underneath resources folder, I didn't put anything in it. So let me take those UI class images. And I want this to be a copy of this. Oh, sorry. Let's just. I could. Since I don't think I need it in here anymore, let me just pull it out of here and find it in, and I'll just drop it down into resources. I'll just move all these highlighted ones over there. There's no point in having them in the regular thing here. Let me also move the let's just move all of the buttons down into resources here. I think it'll be smart enough to know where they were in the button images here. Okay, so it still found those That isn't going to break anything. Mage 100, but those are down in resources. Let me just click on this real quick. And let's see, all the buttons are there. That's fine. If I click on this and look for my button, the War 100 it shows it as down assets, resources, and all that. So all the buttons are down there in my resources folder. Click on resources, and we see that we have 6 things here, 3 classes in their normal and their highlighted form. So that means then now I can just load, and I can give it a file name, and it would be something like Mage. This is going to be Mage 100 HL. Okay, I think that should be fine here. Resource.load. Oh, I should tell it what it's loading here. That should probably be a sprite. All right. So I think that's fine there. The reason I loaded the highlighted version here, I'm going to need, the reason I stored the non-highlighted ones is I'm going to have to restore the normal one after it's clicked. Now, why is this thing here? Semicolon expected where? Oh, because of this. This sprite here equals highlighted, and that should take care of that. I'll swap it out. Whoops. Okay, that'll swap it out. That's not going to be perfect here because I'm going to need to have the unhighlighted images as well. And since I don't know which button was previously selected, notice I'm going to change class selected here. And I probably should have a none field here inside my class, just to make it clear that class none, because that's going to be my default value for that class selected, before we store into it. Okay. So I can just set it here to be mob.classtype. Come on. Why are you having trouble with that? Is there a problem with mob? Okay. You should be able to complete this Visual Studio dot class. Sorry, I'm just fighting with this. And it's confused. It has no idea what class type is. The mob class type does not exist in the current context. It's fine over here. You certainly know what that is. I guess maybe I need to say using mob. Are you going to be okay with that? All right. Nope. So I'm trying to figure out why it has a problem with that. I can use these values down here, but I can't use them up here. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to restart Visual Studio here. Let me just pause this. Okay, now all I did was just save. It didn't even save it. It was already saved out. All I did was just exit Visual Studio and restart it, and now the type is here. So this is a Visual Studio bug. All right, I hate to throw that around, but that's clearly what's going on here. I don't want to make a class mage here, but class none. Now, okay, this is how we'll indicate that nothing has been selected for a class. In case I have a mob that doesn't have a class, that might be possible, but I need it for this variable here because I need to show that it hasn't been selected. And the images, the sprites, I should say, for the highlighted ones, well, I can make them locally here. I'm going to need to have the unhighlighted ones out here. So, private sprite, and that's mage icon, private sprite, priest icon, private sprite, and that's the warrior icon. Okay, those will need to be loaded in here. And I'm just going to come down here and grab this magic line right here. because it has the resource load in it. And that will save my life a little bit of stress, because I can say I need to find that. I want the mage icon first. Mage icon, load sprite, and that will just be this without the HL. Okay, and then I will say priest icon equals resources dot load. Spelling resources wrong. Load sprite, and that would be priest 100, and the warrior icon equals resources dot load sprite warrior 100. Okay, so I'm loading those sprites in, and the reason is that I will have to let me create another function here, private void restore selected icon, because I'm going to need to switch class selected. I'm going to create a switch statement, multi-way branch based on the type of the selected, and that will be mob.classType. Thank you very much. .class mage is one possibility. Case mob.classType .class priest is one possibility. Case mob.classType .class warrior. These are the three possibilities that I'll have to handle. If it's a mage, then I want to say that the mage button, this was previously selected, and I'm going to restore it. .sprite .image, not mage button image. .sprite equals, and that one was mage icon. Break. Okay, to branch out of that. The priest will be yeah, let me just highlight that, copy that in, paste that in, paste that in. I have no default class. The only default would be none, and I don't need to worry about that. The priest button will have the priest icon. You see, I'm just restoring. If there was a previous selected one, I'm restoring its icon. And the way I'm going to use it is that when we go to select somebody like this, before I select somebody, I will say restore selected icon. And I don't have to know what the selected one is. The alternative is to make that switch statement in every one of these functions, which I don't want. Okay, so I'll do that before class is selected. So it puts it back. Now, if there was none selected beforehand, if nobody's clicked on any of the buttons, the class type will still be set to class none, and we will fall right out of the switch, not doing anything. This will restore all of them, and now I just need to copy this line here, copy that, put it up here, and this will be priest 100 HL. There's no need to have this outside of this function that I know of right now, because the only time we're going to need to have the highlighted icons is when we assign the highlighted icon to a sprite, which is a very rare thing. And this is actually, oops, this should be the priest button. And the warrior button. And that will take care of all of those cases as far as I'm aware. Save it off, and let's see, first of all, if it compiles, and second of all, if it actually does anything useful. Alright, so as I hover over it, the text changes. If I click on it, now I get a highlight. Click on this one, it restores, this new one's highlighted, and so this is why you see we're restoring the image to remove the highlight from whatever the last thing we clicked on. If I click it again, it clears the highlight and then puts the highlight back on, so double click doesn't do anything. But it does give me a visual clue what it is, would be nice if the text stuck around. Maybe I'll worry about that some other time. But what I have is a way of indicating what class I want, the attributes, the name, and all of that stuff gets copied into the player structure when that button is set. The name, the attributes, and the class. That's as much as we can fill in for the class data right now in the character create. But once we're done, then we'll want to do a class transition, not class, a scene change to take us out of this dialog. This dialog box, this scene with the character create dialog in it. And so we'll go into the game scene. The game scene was listed in, if we open up the scenes and we look in the scenes folder, it's zone 1. So we'll go into zone 1. Now in the future we might have more than one zones, and we might want to set go into a different zone, either a random one or one per class or something like that. We can do that later. For right now, let's do a scene change into zone 1 upon this. So let's look into that. What we'll need to do is we will need to have the scene load, and then once the scene's load, switch over. I think the best recommended way of doing that is to do an asynchronous scene load. So that's what we're going to do next. Now we're going to load this new scene with a coroutine, because we don't know how long it's going to take. Sometimes people will do things in the background while the scene is loaded, either animations on the transition scene, progress bar, something like that. But for right now, let's just get the thing loaded in the background with a coroutine, and then we'll be good to go. I think I'll put the coroutine down here. Coroutines all return an IE numerator, and not enumerable, but enumerator. And that is sort of a counter to indicate how far into the coroutine we are. I believe we have already used them in this class. At one point, I was using coroutines, I think, to scroll the scroll bar down to the bottom when text was inserted, because I couldn't be sure when the scroll bar was going to be in a position to be moved. Okay, so it could be a frame or two for that to happen. This particular thing will be load initial scene, and what we will do here is start with the scene manager. Now it's complaining because I don't have a return type yet. Okay, not all code paths return a value. Not a problem. We'll get to that. We're going to use the scene manager here, and I see the scene manager is not done here, so I was not entered into our using statement here. So using, and this will be under Unity Engine .scene management. Okay, because we're changing scenes. So the scene manager, which is what I was about to do, and we'll see scene manager and some of the different things we can do. I want to load a scene async. Now the async scene will load in the background asynchronously. I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know when it's going to finish, and I don't want to just hang everything before that. It may appear to be the same way I'm using it, but and it'll be zone 1 will be the initial scene here. It may appear to be that way because I'm not going to be doing anything special, but having it running in the background gives me the option to do that. For right now, I'll just say, first of all, what scene manager is going to return to me is going to be an async operation. Async operation, and loading equals that. Okay, and then I'll just say while loading, while it's not, loading dot is done. And I'm doing a busy wait here. I hate those. If you took operating systems from me, you'll understand I don't like them. But for this background scene, this coroutine is to do nothing other than that. I could adjust a scroll bar or something here as the scene is loading, but for now I have to do something to let it finish. And so that will get us this coroutine will perform the load and then return once the scene has loaded. Okay, so when I come up here to the player select screen here, I want to now do a start coroutine, and I'll just say, what did I say? Load initial scene. Oops, make the call to it because it works like a function call. So I think that should work. I think it will. Let's see. Say that. Go back over here, run it. Okay, I have several things I need to do before that. You know, I should have probably checked in here as well to not allow play icon to turn active until selected scene was something other than scene none. I did not put that check in here. And I distribute my points. I type in my name, Fred. I'm not very creative right now. And there's nothing to prevent me from selecting something and then hitting play. And you see the transition occurred. We're in here running. Okay, it was that easy to do. And then I can just say quit in here and we're back to the editor. Alright, so with this video here we have properly taken everything out of this box here and created a player structure with all the information in it that will be available in the global namespace. We can just say player.instance anywhere inside of our other scripts and get a copy of the player structure, reference to it, and then we can then pull these values out. I have not done anything sophisticated with access modifiers. Unfortunately, I can't do too much with C#. I don't have the concept of a friend class, which we would have in other languages. Some purists say that friend is a horrible thing, but how can I possibly say that I want this particular class, create character, or character create, to be able to store values into the player structure, but nobody else can change it. It can only be read from it. Now, obviously, things like these attributes could be changed later on by through other techniques. I mean, some other things could happen. We could give them more points when they level up or something like that. The name is unlikely to change. The class is unlikely to change. I'm taking some chances here. It would be nice to lock that stuff down, but frankly, I can't list any of these things and say that they couldn't be changed later on. We might even have a way to change a class somehow inside the game. So I'm not going to make that choice there. I would like to restrict the play button to only happen when the class has been selected. If and that would be the class selected is not equaled, or if it's currently equal to mob.classType.class none, then return. That will also get us out on pool 0. We can do the same thing down here on input handler. If class selected is equal to mob.classType.class none, return. This, however, does not properly handle when this is the last thing, when people have distributed the points and they have added a name. The play button wouldn't be active if they haven't selected a class. So the class selection might be the last thing that happens here. So if this is the case, I'll want to say if pool, but can't spell pool, dot value is not equal to 0. That's one of the things. And input.text.length is not equal to 0. Then I can say play button dot interactable equals true. Alright, so this little thing here we'll check to see if we're the last thing that's been done, we'll turn on the play button. And I can put that all down here at the end of each one of these. And now that will take care of holding off the play button until all three pieces of information have been entered in. Okay, so I will enter in these values here. Okay, I will enter in the name, and then I select a class, and play didn't turn on. Why is that? Not sure why that didn't happen. So I'll have to exit out of here. Let's take a look at the scripts. Probably something very simple here to do. If the pool value is not equal to 0, actually I want it to be equal to 0. Oh, there's my problem. Okay, because I'm not coming up with an error to get out of here. I'm saying if all of the other cases have been satisfied, let's go ahead and let the dialog complete. So I will arbitrarily move my points out, select a name, hit enter, nothing happens. Select one of these classes, play button activates. Okay, play button will remain active whenever I switch these because it will continue to see that these values are done. I suppose if I clear that out, actually once I turn it on, it never turns back off again. So it is possible to either once we get the play button turned on, we could go back and change the pool value here, although it's not. Okay, see, I could go back and fiddle with this. The play button is still there. Slight bug there, a little defect, but easily fixed, I think, with a little bit more work. But I'm not going to do that in this video here. All right, so what we've done here is we've finished up the character create dialog. We have transitioned into the game, and the player structure has been filled in as best we can in the initial time. Look at the player thing here and see what about hit points, what about armor class. Well, those things we should be able to calculate in the player create script based on some values there. We should have some idea of what the hit points should be for a class. That's probably class specific. Alright, and since I see I have a little bit of time left here, let's just go and set this value in here to do that. And that would be, see, his player fortunately is only available on click. I think I will make the player instance available to the entire script here. And now I can't do that, I don't think. But I can set it here and declare it here and initialize it down here. Okay, so that start it gets instance. Now I have it available everywhere. Why would I want it outside of that? Typically I wouldn't, but now I might want to inside here to say player dot AC equals 10, player dot HP equals 14. I'm just making these numbers up here. But now I can just copy these in here, paste them down here. I put it in this section here, so I'll try to keep it in the same relative order here so that we can see. Warriors should get higher armor class, so I'll give it 50% more armor class, give them more hit points. That's quite a bit more. Priests should have a little bit higher class than mages, and a little bit more, 15, 16 hit points maybe. Maybe I should up this up a little bit more here to like 22, so that there's a significant variation in these. So our mages are physically the weakest, the priests come, and then the warriors. Now these values will get changed as we click on the classes, and so those will get changed, will be class dependent. The offense and defense will need to be calculated when weapons are added and when they're equipped. So the easiest thing to do is just not equip them, and to maybe set zeros in there for those values inside the side character create when the play button is set. So player dot offense equals 0, player dot defense equals 0. I'll come up with other values of that later, but for right now, worry about that. No skills will be given to them just yet. Their attack range and all that will be set when they set up a weapon. We can give them maybe some sort of a hand-to-hand skill or something like that, but now we're going to get into combat stuff, and I'll want to do that in another video here, probably the next video, but we're really set to do that. But what we'll need to do going forward, spend a couple minutes talking about that, to add combat. First of all, I'll need to create some of these mob instances for the orcs, for all the enemies when they get created into a scene. So they will need to each instantiate one of these things, one of those structures. Most of the stuff will be in mob, but I'm going to create another one called NPC. That will be the NPC variant. Like with a player, they'll have their main data in mob, but we might have other stuff like controllers and stuff like that down in the specific types of mobs that are used there. So I want to create some NPC data structures that will include all of the mob data for the different types. Now, what I think I'll also do is, what I typically do is I create some sort of a database that will be really just stored in RAM the whole time. So it will be like another singleton object that will be looking up data for particular types of mobs. So we look up information on an orc. We might have more than one type of orc. So we might have some sort of elite orc. We might have orc mages and orc warriors and orc priests. And so we could create those and that information in the database, and then load them up by mob type when a mob is created. So we'll have to have some routines that will create new mobs for that. And it'll be a little bit more than just putting the models in the world. But you see, the models are in the world right now, but I'm going to take them back out of the world. So they won't be there. And what we'll have to do is introduce the concept of mob spawning before combat will be there. That means that the mobs will have some routines that we will call to create them and put them into the world. And we can put them into the world, and we can also give them their waypoints and stuff like that. Somehow we'll need to load that all in out of a database when they get created. And so the spawning is going to be a prerequisite for it. We'll need to create weapons that will be not only the weapon graphics, the models. Those models, you can get them off the Unity Asset Store. They come in different sizes. They scale differently, so each one's going to have some sort of an attachment point. Where does it connect to the hand? Presumably the hand. Each model will have to identify the left and right hand so that we can attach things to it. So those points are in the... I can't show it to you in this scene here. Make sure this is saved out. It is. Let me load up another scene really quickly. Open scene, and I go into scenes and bring up zone 1. So zone 1 comes up, and we have the orc camp, and we see we have these orcs. Let's bring up an orc. See, the orc model has under the hips and the legs, and there's the spine. Attached to the spine there are the shoulders. So a right shoulder has a right arm, which has a right forearm, which has a right hand. And then there we have the individual fingers down there. We can identify this hand as an attachment point. It has a transform that is relative to the transforms of everything above it. So all I have to do is, and now I can just search this using my Find Deep Child, can't I? I can just say, given a model, as long as I've named those the same, and different models from different sources may name them differently, but as long as they identify a hand someplace, I can make the model's name for the hand be like right hand and left hand. And I can say, go search the model and find the right hand. Go find the left hand. I can then attach, just as we can put children under here for the fingers and the thumbs, we can also put a weapon underneath there. And that weapon will fit right into the hand, just like the fingers do. And it will move as the hand and the arm and the character all move. So it will look good. We would need to have animations for the combat animations, swinging the weapons and stuff like that. I think we have a number of those. I've already have a number of those animations downloaded, but you can always go back out to Mixamo and get them. If you pulled your model from Mixamo. If you didn't pull your model from Mixamo, there's a chance you can go take your model, if it's a bipedal model, and take it back out to Mixamo and have it rig it through their script. I haven't done that. Other people have. So I gather it is possible, and probably not too much work to do that. But it is possible to make other biped models work with Mixamo animations if you go through the proper steps there. But once you pull those combat animations down, and there are a number of predefined ones that work with any of their rigged models. So there's sword swinging, and there's guns, and all sorts of combat animations in there, hand-to-hand, all sorts of martial arts stuff. Then we can play those animations when an attack occurs. We can switch the weapons out by switching what's attached to the right hand. We would need to keep track of what weapons are equipped so that we can remove them. We might attach them all with the same name, like primary weapon or something like that. So we can go down and find the piece underneath here and exchange it with another weapon model. When we have that ability to swap the weapons in and out, along with it, we should have a database of the weapons that not only tell us things like how do we scale them, and also where's the attachment point on the weapon relative to the weapon point. That's going to be another transform is what we're creating. We're creating a separate transform in our database to say that we want the weapon to be attached at a different position. We'll want it to be rotated this way so it looks normal in the hand, and we'll want it to be scaled this way so it looks like it's the right size. So we're essentially creating another transform that we will apply to whatever the transform the model comes in with. We'll override its transform with information. How do we get that? Well, what we do is we just go into the inspector, we take the sword or whatever the weapon is, and we drag it in, attach it to the hand, rescale it, rotate it around, and we manipulate it in the inspector until it looks right, and then we record the transform numbers. These will always be local transform information relative to the parent, in which case would be the hand. They'll be relative to a hand, assuming we attach it right underneath the hand. So we just record that, put it in our database. At that point, whenever we switch to that weapon in the future, we just load that transform into the new weapon, and it will appear and work correctly. All right, so that's the mechanics of animations and weapon changes and how we'll do that. And in an upcoming video, then we'd have to have combat rules. The chasing behavior will be part of that. That's not too hard to do, but it'll mean that when an enemy sees us and we get within its range, notice that when we defined mob behavior, and I think I probably took that, nope, it's out here, it's right here. Down here there were things like aggro range and de-aggro range. How far away will the mob aggro? So we will not begin chase behavior until we get within that range. Easiest thing to do is to set up a collider around a spherical collider around the mob with that range as the diameter of the collider, and when the collider goes off, we will see what entered it. If it was a player that entered it, then we will initiate combat, the chase behavior. So we'll move its movement state out of patrol or whatever it is and move it into chase, and that will cause us then to each frame take the target. We'll assign it to the player then as a target. And players just can be a game object at that point. It's important that targets be a game object so that target can be a static thing in the scene as well as a mobile thing. Each frame we will take the position of the target, such as the player, and we will make that the agent destination for the navigation agent. That will cause it to path towards it. Since we're using a navigation agent, it will automatically avoid obstacles in the way. That's the easiest way to do just a range detection. If you further wanted to take a step forward, you might want to consider doing a line of sight check to see if not only are we within range, but are we within line of sight to it. We know the current facing of the mob, and we can cast a ray out of that, and we can check the angle that the ray makes with the facing to see if it's in a particular arc within the cone out of the front of the model, so that we could say, oh, that's behind the creature, they didn't see it. The ray casting will also say, if we cast a ray out of the creature's head, and we can find that because note, within the orc model, we saw the hips and the spine, we have the neck right here, and there's the head. We can select the head, for example, and we can make that the origination point of the ray. And we know the position of the player. We can just cast the ray towards that. The ray cast will return the first game object that it runs into as the ray progresses out, or we will get an indication that no game object was found. That's what happens when we cast rays off into the skybox earlier. We were clicking to try to target things. We cast rays out from the scene to where the mouse is pointing. Well, if we cast a ray from an orc towards the player and it hits something else, we can say that there's no line of sight. Okay, it's obstructed by something else. But if the ray does hit the player as the very first thing it hits, then there is obviously line of sight between the two. So those are some of the advanced things that we could do with our targeting and our chasing. The chase behavior would just move the agent towards the player until it hits us. Now, if we go back to the chase behavior on the scripts attached to the orc, we'd see the AI character control. I will bring that up here. And note that when we're doing this update in patrol, it's always checking the remaining distance. How close are we to our target? Down here we're checking waypoints, but under chase we will be checking the distance to our target, calculated this way. And when we get within a certain particular distance, here we said near waypoint, but it'll be something like near target, we will stop. We will not continue moving on into the target. We will stop just short of the target, and then we can initiate our attacking. If our target moves away from us, and we're in chase behavior, we can continue to move forward until we get within that point again and continue attacking. So that's how we'll handle that. Okay, I think I've talked long enough. This was a nice productive video, but you can see we're getting closer to it, and hopefully very soon we will have some of the combat that you're looking for.